What the heck is this? I don't understand any of this. Darwin? Lamarck? Hey, Letty.
Yeah?
Do you understand what we're learning in Nagaishi today?
Yeah, it's really easy.
Do you think that you could tell me what we're learning, and explain it to me because I only understand a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Come on, let's walk.
Charles Robert Darwin was born on February 12, 1809 in Shrewsbury, England. He passed away on April 18, 1882, but throughout his lifetime he made several scientific discoveries. He was a naturalist and a biologist, and he was most widely known for two of his theories, which is the theory of evolution and natural selection, or survival of the fittest.
Wow, okay. I think I remember Nagaishi talking about that in class today.
Also, in 1831, he took a 5-year trip across the world on the HMS Beagle to study different organisms.
On December 27, 1831, Darwin and his crew embarked on a 5-year-long journey across the world, all on the HMS Beagle. It was intended to only last 2 years, but it ended up lasting 5. Interestingly, the trip was actually supposed to be a way to survey the coastlines and harbors of South America in order to improve maps, but we all know it as the way Darwin was able to make some scientific discoveries. He set off on the voyage inexperienced but came back as a naturalist. Through his voyage, Darwin was studying all types of organisms, like fossils and living things. They would eventually lead him into creating his theory of evolution. Throughout the islands that Darwin explored, he noticed a variety of similarities and differences. When he was at the Galapagos Islands, several of the species there were similar to those in South America, yet they weren't migrants, leaving Darwin to wonder how they even got there in the first place. One of the most fascinating to Darwin was the Galapagos tortoises. He was able to see that each island was inhabited by them, but they had slight differences, such as tortoises from Duncan Island having saddle-backed shells, and those from the Indefatigable Island having dome-shaped shells. Another example, which is most widely known, are Darwin's finches, and I don't think it needs much of a background. Darwin's theory of evolution basically states that it is the process in which organisms change over time, and it can also be described as descent with modification. The idea was first developed in his book on the origin of species, where he states that organisms change due to changes in heritable physical or behavioral traits, which allow the organism to be more successful in its environment. Since this theory is supported by many types of scientific disciplines, it is much more credible. The two main points to his theory include that all life on Earth is connected to each other and that they are a product of modifications of populations by natural selection. This basically means that in order for evolution to happen, so does natural selection, which is essentially that organisms that are more adapted or evolved in their environment are much more successful in their environment.
Darwin was not the first naturalist to propose that species change over time into new species. There was also Lamarck.
Oh yeah, I remember Nagaishi talk about Lamarck. Yeah, I know a few things about him, like his name was Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, and he was born on August 1st, 1744, in France, and died on September 18th, 1829. He was also the first to propose a mechanism by which the gradual change of species might take place. Also, he extended the definition of change over time, saying that life started out simple and became more complex. His theory is alternatively referred to the theory of transformation, or simply Lamarckism. Isn't it crazy that, today Lamarck's work is considered a major step forward? In his lifetime, he did not receive much recognition. Wow, imagine that.
I know.
You work so hard to prove something and you don't even get recognition. But anyway, at least his name will live on in biology.
Yeah.
I remember Nagaishi talking about two of his theories. One was his theory of use and disuse, which was that if an organism continues to use a particular structure, it will continue to evolve. But if it is not used, the structure will degenerate and disappear. An example of use and disuse is how an animal uses a particular part of its body, and the stronger and better developed the part becomes. For example, giraffes, and how over time a giraffe's neck gets longer and stronger because they stretch their necks to reach their food from trees or higher places. Another example is an athlete, and how he or she develops the strength of certain muscles by constant use. The second part of Lamarck's mechanism for evolution involved the inheritance of acquired traits. He believed that traits changed or acquired over an individual's lifetime could be passed down to its offspring. Like, for example, giraffes that had acquired long necks would have offspring with long necks rather than the short necks their parents were born with. Another example of this would be that if you are super intelligent and you know how to play games really good, then your child or offspring will inherit the same traits that you have. This type of inheritance, sometimes called Lamarckian inheritance, has been disproven by the discovery of hereditary genetics. While Lamarck was studying this, he made a couple mistakes because Lamarck didn't know how traits would inherit through genes. Genes are not changed by activities in life. They could only be changed through a mutation which occurs in an organism before it is born. So that's why it is wrong, broskies. Even though both of Lamarck's theories were wrong, both him and Darwin based their work off of proof of evolution, like fossils, homologous structures, and
Vestigial organs.
oh yeah.
And also the similarities of embryos. And there was also another one Nagaishi talked about.
Oh yeah, I think I remember it. Wasn't it similarities in chemical makeup?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Evidence comes in many forms. Thousands of human fossils enable researchers and students to study the changes that occurred in brain and body size, locomotion, diet, and other aspects regarding the way of life of early human species over the past 6 million years. Millions of stone tools, figurines, and paintings, footprints, and other traces of human behavior in the prehistoric record tell about where and how early humans lived. Advances in the dating of fossils and artifacts help determine the age of those remains, which contributes to the big picture of the different milestones on the question of how humans evolved. Damn, isn't that crazy? The second proof of evolution are homologous structures. Homologous structures are when very different animals have bones that appear very similar in form or function and seem to be related. A few examples are how a dolphin's flipper, bird's wing, cat's leg, and the human arm are considered homologous structures. Whereas human beings have bones such as the humerus, ulna, radius, wrist bones, and fingers. These features appear as similar bones in a form in other animals. Bats, whales, and many other animals have very similar homologous structures, demonstrating that these creatures all had a common ancestor. Another example is how mammals share the homologous structures of the vertebrae in common. For instance, in spite of its height, the giraffe has the very same number of neck bones, which are 7, as a giant whale and a tiny human being. Another example is how human beings, dogs, and cats all have similar pelvises, which are homologous structures to a vestigial pair of bones that snakes have. These bones are the last remains of a pelvis with no legs to attach. Like I said, There are way more examples of homologous structures, which, like I said before, also contribute to the big picture of evolution.
The third proof of evolution are vestigial organs. They are basically structures in the body that seem to have absolutely no function but might have in the past. A couple examples include snakes and humans. Snakes have pelvic bones, but since they don't have legs, they could have had ancestors with them. In humans, there is the tailbone and the human uniform appendix. The human uniform appendix is the most used examples to prove evolution in humans. The fourth proof of evolution is the similarities of embryos, which is shown through the study of embryos, otherwise known as embryology. As embryos, several mammals are difficult to differentiate since they look extremely alike. The traits of certain animals could be visible in the embryo of another. For example, both human and fish embryos are born with gill slits, but we obviously don't have gills. Another example, which was provided for us in class, was that human embryos resemble those of a pig.
The fifth and final proof of evolution is similarities in chemical makeup, which is also known as comparative biochemistry. Biochemistry is the study of basic chemistry and processes that occur in cells. It involves the comparison of DNA proteins such as cytochrome C and hemoglobin, and chromosomes across different species. Similarities in the comparison can be used as evidence in support of evolution. Different species of organisms may contain the same genes with slight variations in sequences. For example, the coding for cytochrome C is very similar in humans, chickens, mice, and horses. The sequence of amino acids in the same part of hemoglobin molecules is identical between gorillas and humans, and these similarities would suggest common ancestry. Some organisms share similar numbers of chromosomes. For example, humans possess 23 pairs of chromosomes, while apes possesses 24 pairs. If evolution was true, perhaps a chromosome fusion occurred, and so humans ended up with one less pair of chromosomes than apes. Like I said, these also contribute to the big picture of evolution. And those are the 5 proofs of evolution.
Hey, do you remember the vocab Nageshi went over? You remember what I'm talking about? I mean, I only remember that he went over gradualism, but that's it.
Do you think you can tell me the definition for that? Because I sort of forgot what he told us, but I know that there is uniformitarianism.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so gradualism is a term that depicts evolution occurring constantly and gradually in each generation of reproduction. In other words, this means that evolution happens slowly.
Uniformitarianism is basically the idea that the same geological process shaping at the Earth today have been at work throughout Earth's history, or simply, that as the Earth is changing slowly, so are living things. You see, you do know what's going on in class. You gave me information that I forgot Nagaishi went over.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, but that whole Darwin thing was so confusing. There was just so much information, and you know how Nagaishi talks.
Yeah, but it's okay because at least we have a really great advanced placement biology teacher.
You're right. Thank you for explaining this to me. I finally understand what's going on. Okay, well, I'll see you because tomorrow we have that test, remember?
Oh, you're right. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, bye.
use synthesis.
It's just like.
Theories like the theory of use synthesis. Okay, we're good. He's gonna pass by and I'm gonna be like, Letty, do you understand this? And then she'll be like, yeah, like totally, like it's so simple, you know? And then